Thousands of years ago, in a land bathed by sunshine and blessed by nature, two nations faced each other in a bitter struggle for dominance and survival. The land of Canaan, home of the Israelites, stood at a crossroads between the mighty kingdoms of Egypt and Mesopotamia. There, among the mountains and fertile valleys, lived men and women who carried in their hearts the promise of a prosperous and secure future under the protection of their God. But not everyone in Canaan shared the same beliefs or sought the same goals. The Philistines, a warlike and ambitious people, had settled in the coastal region, becoming a constant threat. Although they shared the same land, the Philistines did not worship the God of the Israelites. Instead, they worshipped their gods and prided themselves on their prowess in battle. The Israelites, under the reign of the brave but flawed King Saul, faced a formidable and feared enemy in the Philistines. Saul led his people with determination, although his heart harbored secrets and doubts known only to himself. Aware of the gravity of the situation, the king knew that a great battle was coming, and although he had confidence in his army, he could not help but fear for the future of his people. In a valley surrounded by rugged mountains, the fate of the two nations was about to be decided in an epic contest. The Israelites and the Philistines lined up on opposite sides of the valley, their war cries and the clatter of their weapons filling the air with palpable tension. At that moment, not only would the fate of these two nations be decided, but also the future of a young shepherd boy named David, whose faith and courage would lead him to face a giant, would be forged. In the Philistine camp, tension and fear mingled in the air. Among the warriors was Goliath, a man of colossal proportions and unparalleled combat skills. Born in the city of Gath, the fighter had grown up in the shadow of war and violence, for life in the Philistine coastal region was difficult and merciless. From a young age, the Philistine showed a special talent for fighting, earning the respect and admiration of his companions. But the giant was no mere bloodthirsty warrior. In his heart, he harbored a deep love for his people and a steely determination to protect them. He had seen the suffering and hardship that war had caused his people, and while he understood that fighting was necessary to secure a future for his people, he dreamed of a day when peace could reign in the land of the Philistines. As the battle drew near, Goliath became the champion of the Philistines, and he was given the task of challenging the Israelites to single combat. If he won, the Philistines would win the war, and his people would be one step closer to the desired peace and security. But if he lost, the future of his family and his people would be in jeopardy. So it was that the Philistine stood before the Israelite army, challenging them with his imposing presence and his thunderous voice. Despite his fearsome appearance and his reputation as an invincible warrior, deep within him, Goliath longed to find an end to the fighting and a beginning for peace. And so, the giant Philistine waited for someone to rise in response to his challenge, never imagining that his fate would cross that of a young Israelite shepherd boy named David, who would change his life and the history of both peoples forever. In the hills of Bethlehem, far from the din of war, a young shepherd boy was tending his flock. Although he did not look it, the boy was the youngest of 8 siblings, born into a humble but devout family. His father, Jesse, had taught him from an early age to trust in God and to value wisdom and justice over brute force. Despite his apparent insignificance, David possessed qualities that made him stand out among his brothers. His heart was full of love and kindness, and his steadfast belief was unshakable. Moreover, he was a gifted young man, capable of playing the lyre with such mastery that his music touched the souls of those who heard it. But beyond his musical abilities, David was also brave and cunning, qualities that would soon be put to the test on the battlefield. As the youngest of the family, he was often overlooked and underestimated, both by his older brothers and those around him, teasing him and telling him that he would not be capable of anything alone. One day, while tending his flock, the shepherd was visited by a prophet, who anointed him as the future king of Israel. Although this event surprised the boy and his family, the young shepherd humbly accepted God's will and continued to work hard to care for his sheep and serve his people. When war broke out between the Israelites and the Philistines, all the older brothers joined King Saul's army, leaving David at home to care for the flock and his elderly parents. Although in his heart he longed to join his brothers and fight for his people, the boy understood that his duty at that time was with his father. Several days passed after the departure of his brothers until, one day, Jesse asked his youngest son to take provisions to the brave men on the front lines of the battle. Although the young man did not know it, this journey would lead him to meet his destiny and face the Philistine giant Goliath, in a fight that would test his faith, courage, and cunning, and in which he would discover the true meaning of being a hero. The brave young man walked into the Israelite camp, carrying with him the provisions and many other gifts his father had sent for his sons. As he walked among the soldiers, he could sense the enormous tension and fear they were emanating in the face of the impending conflict with the Philistines. Despite his inexperience in war, David felt in his heart a determination to protect his people and his family, following the path God had laid out for him. As he delivered the charge to his brothers, he heard the challenge of Goliath, the Philistine giant who demanded single combat against an Israelite warrior. Seeing the fear in the eyes of his brothers and the other soldiers, the boy felt a deep calling in his heart. Despite his youth and lack of fighting experience, he realized that his loyalty to God and his cunning might be the key to winning in battle against the giant and freeing his people from the fear that oppressed them. The boy approached King Saul, and with a voice full of determination, volunteered to face Goliath. His brothers mocked him, because they did not believe in his abilities. Besides, he had never received military training, because he was too young. However, seeing the seriousness of the youngest, surprised and worried, they tried to dissuade him, arguing that he was still an inexperienced child to challenge such a fearsome warrior. But the humble shepherd was determined and shared with the king and his brothers how he had faced and defeated a ferocious lion to protect his flock, always trusting in God's strength and guidance. King Saul, moved by the young shepherd's courage and faith, accepted his offer and allowed him to represent the Israelites in the duel against Goliath. At that moment, David not only accepted the call to the battlefield but also took on the responsibility of fighting for his people and challenging his fears and limitations. Before facing the giant, the boy withdrew to a quiet place to pray and meditate. With his heart trusting in God, he sought the strength and wisdom necessary to defeat the giant. The boy knew that his success would not depend on his physical strength or fighting skills but on his devotion. When he returned to the camp, King Saul offered David his armor and sword, thinking that he would need all the equipment possible to challenge the Philistine. However, the shepherd, feeling the weight of the armor on his body, realized that it was not with weapons or protection that he would defeat the giant. Instead, he decided to confront Goliath with the tools he knew and trusted, his cunning, and hope in the Lord of heaven. The young man approached a nearby stream, and with a slow and thoughtful gesture, he chose 5 smooth stones to take with him to the confrontation. Although it seemed an insignificant decision, the choice of stones symbolized the young man's confidence that God would guide him and give him the necessary strength for the fight. With his stones in his hand and his sling around his shoulder, the Israelite headed for the battlefield, ready to face the Philistine giant. His faith in himself had never been stronger than at that moment, and he was determined to prove that even a lowly shepherd could defeat a feared and mighty warrior if he trusted in God and his courage. The sun was shining brightly in the sky as David and Goliath stood face to face on the battlefield. The armies of both sides looked on in horror at the scene, awaiting the challenge that would decide the fate of their peoples. At that moment, the differences between the two combatants were more than evident. Goliath, an experienced and feared giant, and David, a young shepherd boy without armor or sword. The enemy warrior looked incredulously at his opponent, and, with a derisive laugh, exclaimed, "Am I a dog that you should come to me with sticks? I will feed your flesh to the birds of the air, and the beasts of the field this very day." Undeterred, the Israelite replied with firmness and conviction, "You come against me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Today, he will deliver you into my hands, and everyone will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is his, and he will deliver you into our hands." The battle began with the Philistine charging furiously toward the boy, displaying his strength and might. Each step of the giant made the earth tremble, and the wind howled around his spear as he wielded it in the air. The humble shepherd, however, trusted in his agility and God's guidance and begged that he would hear him and help him in the macabre battle. He deftly dodged Goliath's blows, using his speed and dexterity to keep him out of reach. As the contest continued, the Philistines' strength and the boy's agility became more evident. The soldiers of both armies watched in amazement as the young shepherd boy managed to evade each of the Philistine giants' powerful attacks. Although the great warrior seemed unstoppable, the young man showed no signs of fear or hesitation. At a decisive moment in the battle, David saw an opportunity, and trusting in God's guidance, he took one of the smooth stones from his bag and placed it in his sling. With astonishing accuracy and speed, he hurled the stone toward his enemy, which impacted directly on the giant's forehead. Goliath staggered and, to the disbelief of all present, fell to the ground with a deafening crash. Victory had come at the hands of the young shepherd, who had proved that faith, cunning, and courage were more powerful than any weapon or brute force. The confrontation between David and Goliath would go down in history as an epic showdown that demonstrated the power of faith and the importance of trusting God in the face of adversity. With the fall of the giant, the course of the war changed, and the Israelites' future as leader and king began to take shape. The impact of the stone on Goliath's forehead knocked the giant down and unconscious. The Israelite and Philistine soldiers, stunned by the scene, could not believe what they had just witnessed. The young shepherd boy had won the victory and had killed the fearsome warrior, thus turning the tide of the war. The winner approached the inert body of the Philistine, and using the giant's sword, cut off his head as a symbol of his victory. The Philistines, seeing the death of their champion, fled in disarray, pursued by the Israelites who, full of courage and hope, defeated them in every corner of the battlefield. The victory of the young shepherd became a symbol of faith and courage for all the people of Israel. His challenge with Goliath proved that, with God's help, even the most incapable, inexperienced, and weak could defeat the most formidable enemies. King Saul, impressed by David's courage and skill, welcomed him into his court and made him a military leader, allowing him to rise quickly through the ranks of the army. But beyond his military triumphs, the boy's victory served as a powerful reminder of the importance of faith and trust in God, even in the darkest and most challenging of times. David's bravery in his confrontation with Goliath left an indelible mark on Israel's history. The young shepherd boy, who had defied a giant and achieved the impossible, became a symbol of hope and courage for his people. In time, the shepherd ascended the throne as the king of Israel, unifying the tribes and ruling with wisdom and justice. His reign marked an era of prosperity and peace for the nation, and his connection with God guided him in every decision he made. Thus, the humble shepherd who defeated a giant became an eternal example of faith, courage, and perseverance for all those who seek to face and overcome life's challenges.